It's come round to Q&A time again. Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy. Let's get on with these. Hi Rosie, would you consider doing a video on UK native plants and cultivars? I'm particularly interested in planting native perennials in my London garden to help support local wildlife, and I'd love to hear your advice on plant choices and layouts. This is almost a video in itself, but let's just put this in a small, concise way. Here in the UK, we are an island that has been invaded by various people from the north of Europe right the way down to the south of Europe, and all of those people over the millennia have brought in their own plant material with them. Therefore, what we consider to be native may not necessarily be so. But what they are is that they are wildflowers that have naturalised in our area and have been here for a long period. So I would rather think about, like with Culpepper's Wildflower book, for instance, you will find some wonderful plant varieties in there. They still grow naturally and have naturalised in our areas. The ones that are non-invasive are the ones that you want to be looking at. So really, very quickly, I would say Mellitus is very good if you want somewhere for the shade. That's a wonderful plant. There are lots of different varieties out there, and there are cultivars that have been bred so that they go in the garden, no problem at all. Veronica, from the low growing to the taller ones, all of those are excellent, and they're very good for the pollinators and for nectaring insects as well. And then primulas, there are lots of wild primulas out there, so those are a few that I would suggest. But I don't like to say native because it's very difficult to say, and in actual fact they have decided that we only have very few native plants, so it is better to say the wild plants that have naturalized and that are not being invasive. That is what you want to be looking at. And if you have a plant that flowers and that produces, you know, some berry or some seed, all of that is good for the wildlife. Hi Rosie, I propagated 8 lavender sprigs, 6 survived. When is a good time to them to be moved on to pots and under lights? We're frozen in North Illinois, which is a zone 5 to 6. Okay, right, so you have an area where your light levels are not good, and I have to say here in the UK we're beginning to get very poor spring light levels as well, and so the use of extra lights will help. And if you can use LEDs in the red and blue spectrum, that helps incredibly. But I would not suggest doing anything like that and forcing the plants on into growth very early on. So I would wait until probably about April, because from what I looked up, it looks as though your springs start about May time. So do wait a little bit more longer and then pot them up. Don't go into too large a pot. Pot them up, give them a bit of supplementary lighting, and then they will be happy. Feed them a little bit, but not too much, and make sure, especially with lavender, that you are giving them quite a sharp draining compost to move them on into. So make sure that that potting medium has got a little bit of grit in it, or maybe a little bit of John Innes soil base there, just so that it doesn't get waterlogged. And that is just something. The thing I would say to you is, you are in the United States and you have a very good program there of what is known as the master growers, and these are people who have taken horticulture at universities, and it goes through the United States and Canada, and then once they go out into the communities with that, they will the ones who are master growers will then volunteer, and they do talks and they will help in the communities. So do look out for that, because they are the people who will be able to help you and know better about your particular area. So I hope that helps you. Also, if you're interested in propagation, why not look at the propagation course that we have got available on the channel. Hello from across the pond. I had a few questions, ideas. Right, this is where I'm going to say something that has been stated before when we have the questions. Please ask one question only at a time. We're happy for ideas, but there isn't enough time within the Q&A, I'm afraid, to do more than one question per person. And if you're asking for planting ideas, then I will give you 3 ideas of plant genera that you could use in a situation. We will take on board everything that's here, and I love the suggestions that is in this long question, but I'm only taking one of these, and that is removing aggressive plants such as Verbena rigida and Lysimachia mummularia. Now, the Verbena rigida is beautiful, but we don't grow it here on the nursery anymore because it seeds forever, and you will get it all over the place. It comes in white, it comes in pink, it comes in lavender, but it can become a real nuisance. Now, if something seeds, get rid of the dead, get rid of the flower heads very, very quickly. Then it can't produce seed. You will find that they have roots that go down. They are a perennial, but they're not a long-lived perennial. So if you can get down and dig them up, they tend not to grow from the cut-off root, but they will grow from seed. So get rid of the flower heads, get rid of the plant itself. That is good. Lysimachia mummularia is slightly different. This is a runner and a creeper, and it will go all over, also known as creeping Jenny. Now, it's great as a ground cover, but once it's got into borders, you leave one little node in there and off it goes again. So you've got to be really very good with this. And like a lot of these plants that are becoming really a little bit too much for your areas, keep on cutting them back. Keep on cutting them back, keep on digging up. Try and remove as much as you can. You may not be able to get it all in one time. The more leaf you remove, the less it can feed itself. So therefore, the more that you are going to reduce its vigour. So get rid of leaf, as much leaf as possible, and then keep on pulling out and digging out. And that is the best way to remove invasive material without resorting to chemicals. Hello Rosie, what hard-working, non-fussy plants for either seasons of interest or long blooming time would you recommend for a gardener on a low budget in England? Many thanks. Okay, so probably the best thing if you don't have a large budget is to start from seed. And I would suggest you get some good annuals to start off with, which will regrow. So something like Nigella, Love in the Mist, brilliant plants. They will do a lot for you. They'll give you a lot of flower and then they'll seed around. That's a starting point. But if you want good perennials that will give you long season, then you can't go far wrong than Geraniums. Geraniums are really good, especially the new hybrid ones, because they rebloom. They don't really care what soil types they are in. They're pretty happy, pretty easy to go. And then as the clumps get bigger, you can divide them. So I would suggest you go with those. Okay, somebody here is asking about camellia and already has been given the advice that, you know, they're getting bud drop in January and February. Now, this is caused by the season prior, when the actual buds are being created, and this is usually in August, September time, and that is actually a time when we have less moisture around. Now, I know you say you live in Cheshire and you have a lot of rainfall up there, but you may find that actually your plants are not getting moisture at the time when they need it. So what I would suggest is that you need to make sure that they are well mulched, and that means that even though you've got a lot of rain, if you've gone and put mulch on and it rains, the mulch then stops the water getting down. So what you need to do is you need to allow them to get really moist and then mulch them. They need camellia food, that will help as well. And that way you will be able to get on. Make sure that they're not in too sunny a position. That also is something that they don't want. They want that partial shade. But do make sure that they are always moist and they've got a good amount of that mulch around the around the base of the plant, so that they keep moisture in there. That's the key thing for them during those summer months. Could you recommend plants for a dry, shady area? I've got bulbs that are growing really well there, but At the moment, not a lot else is doing. Wanting something for summer and autumn. Well, spring in dry shade is usually really easy. There's a lot of plant material out there that you can grow, and I would suggest Amsonias, so they're sort of late spring. But you specifically asked for summer and autumn, so two that I would recommend are in the aster family. So Eurybia divaricata is a really good one that will grow really well for you, and another one is Aster pedunculata that will also cover and go through that area really well. So try those ones out. Now this is another one from the USA in zone 6. So when do I move my perennials and plant new roses? So again, I would suggest you do this for spring for both of these, because then you know where the plants are and what they're doing. Because having looked at zone 6, it looks like you have a moderate growing season, but you have a good spring, and then once you get to the end of the season, you quickly go into your winter period. So if you go and lift and divide in the winter period and you're putting in and they're then getting cold, it's not as good for the plants. And again, please do look up your master grower in that area. They will give you so much more advice and help, and you are lucky that you have something like that in your country to be able to utilise. Okay, I live in Cambridgeshire. I would like some ground cover recommendations for a narrow border which is between a concrete path and a wooden fence. So this is one of those real horrible little narrow borders. Stony clay, happy to put compost in. From full shade to part shade, so the whole lot, southeast facing, under the sunniest panel, the area is narrow. Okay, so that's fine. So what I would suggest is, yes, prepare the ground really well, make sure you incorporate a good amount of compost. With it being clay, you do need to add that organic matter in. Now in your driest, sunniest area, I would suggest you look for alpines. And then as you change situations, just go for plant material that likes part shade and then full shade. That way you will get the right materials. Now you're looking to put plug plants in. I understand that is one of the cheaper ways of doing it. I would recommend every now and again though you do put a slightly bigger plant in, because then it will look a little bit fuller and they will get away quite nicely. Now you're asking what distance you should be putting these plug plants in. So what you have to think about is how big the plant is getting. So if it's an alpine, most of them will get to something around about 15 centimetres, 6 to 7 inches round. So if you have that next to that one, what you're looking at as your distance is the centre of the plant. So that is somewhere between 20 centimetres and a foot, which means that you're going either 9 inches or 12 inches apart when you're putting those plugs in, and then they will fill in the space around them. I hope that makes sense to you. I'm planning a woodland area and looking for plants with interesting contrasting foliage, also looking for recommendations of ferns for the area. Okay, so this sort of is two things in this question. I will give you three plant suggestions. Mathiosella blupiloroides is a really good shade-loving plant. It's very architectural, its foliage is beautiful, it's got a grey tint to it, it's quite a nice divided plant. It does flower up to around about just under a metre, so about 3 feet, and then the plant will make to around about 2 feet, 60 centimetres with its foliage. Very, very architectural, good-looking plant. Once it's finished flowering, you get that wonderful shape. For a fern, Blechnum spicant is a brilliant fern. It's a really lovely fern. It comes out and arches. So again, it's architectural, it's evergreen. So that is a fantastic one to look at. And then for shade again, Mellitus, one of the UK natives, is a very, very good plant. It's a little bit more upright. It has a rounded leaf. It's a different colour. So those are things that you could think about. Right, my first time growing geraniums from seed. Now here we're talking about pelargoniums. We're not talking about the hardy geraniums. We're talking about pelargoniums, the ones that you grow in containers or plant out as a bedding mix. And yes, you've been giving suggestions, people saying doing cuttings is correct. doing cuttings is the easiest way to get a flowering plant quickest. However, to do a cutting, you have to have a plant to start off with. So either you buy a plant that you like the colour of, and you then start taking cuttings and you do cuttings every year of that. Or if you're growing from seed, you have to remember the plant will grow for the first year. It may give you a little bit of flower, but then in the second year or in that autumn, you can take cuttings to overwinter, then have flowering plants for the following year. So it is a matter of having a starting plant, so you have a stock plant that you're then going to be taking your cuttings from. So I hope that makes sense to you. Hi Rosie, do you have any recommendations for making a moist, well-drained compost mix for pots, please? Tried mixing all sorts of things with it, you know, grit, perlite, horticultural sand. They get too soggy or too dry and then I can't rehydrate them. Okay, so yes, this is quite a difficult one. I would always suggest that you use something like a John Innes mix to go in with your material that you're using as the base. That will give you a really good grounding, and John Innes is basically a soil mix. So you could use your own garden soil in the mix and mix that into your compost just to lighten it up a bit, and that works a lot better for growing in containers. So do try that. Right, now I've got two questions that are slightly similar, and because one of them is asking about mycorrhizal and then the other one as well, I'm going to take the bit from this question which is not about the mycorrhizal. So this is from Kate from cold Poland, and she's wanting to know what I think about growth stimulators like ASISL or Super Thrive or any of the similar growth stimulators, and whether they are usable on weak roses and whether I think they're worth using. So yes, growth stimulators are good because they will help the plants. They help them get, it's a bit like us taking, you know, sort of vitamin C or vitamin D to help us. So growth stimulants are the equivalent for your plants. So it is worth giving them those, but do read the instructions on the bottle and do not overdose, because if you overdose you can do as much harm as good. So that is something I would say when you are using those, and they are a good product. Okay, so they will help with the plant, it will help it with its natural defences, it will help it absorb more of the nutrients from the soil that it can do, and you will find you get a healthier plant if you use some of these growth stimulants. Now, let's go on to the mycorrhizal fungi. I've seen lots of recommendations for mycorrhizal fungi when planting roses, trees. How effective is it for use on annuals, flowers and vegetables? I've also seen other biological additives, etc. So in this question, the other biological additives are similar to what I have just said in the previous question. So let's just concentrate on the mycorrhizal fungi. Now, any mycorrhizal fungi that can be put into the soil will have a benefit. However, when you buy these sachets of mycorrhizal fungi, remember that they are produced in mass quantity, therefore they will have the most common mycorrhizal fungi in them, which probably means your soil has already got them. So I tend to make this analogy whereby if you have already prepared the soil correctly, planted the plants really well and gone through all the process of doing it in a good manner, then why are you putting mycorrhizal fungi on which are already probably in your soil, other than to make you feel good? And it is sort of a placebo. I think sometimes people buy the mycorrhizal fungi, think, gosh, this is a very, very expensive product, and therefore actually do the soil preparation and everything so much better because they're putting something expensive into the soil. And therefore it's not actually the mycorrhizal fungi, it's the fact that you've prepared it properly in the first place. So you've got a little bit of a placebo effect in there. It is far better if you've got a vegetable plot or you've got an area where everything is growing really well and you take a small amount of that garden soil and you put that into the new planting hole, because you are inoculating that hole with what you've already got that is a good growing media, and it's fresh, it's not dried, it's not coming out of a packet. So that is something that I would say. This has been asked of Melvin Sheldrake, the champion of mycorrhizal and fungi in the garden, and he has come up with exactly the same answer that I've always come up with, and that is, if it's in a packet and it's multiple produced, it's got to be the basic stuff. It is far better to get fresh from a good soil area. If you've got a friend who's got a garden which is much better than yours, just ask for a couple of handfuls of their good growing soil and put it into each area of yours, and you will find it will be much more beneficial than buying the expensive mycorrhizal properties. And I wouldn't bother with using it on annuals and flowers like that. It's not worth it. Just prepare the soil properly. Use your own garden compost. That will be full of mycorrhizal, and they will all be there, natural, living and not dried. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.